Today's webinar is hosted by QuickNode, Matter Labs, Offchain Labs, and the Optimism Foundation. And if you're not already familiar, QuickNode is the leading end-to-end Web3 developer platform. QuickNode is transforming blockchain infrastructure and tooling by simplifying development and providing high-performance access to over 40 chains. Since 2017, QuickNode has empowered hundreds of thousands of developers and companies to focus on innovation by accelerating dApp build times and offering enterprise-grade solutions to businesses of every size. Our newly launched Rollup as a Service product, which you'll hear more about today, enables you to deploy a fully managed, customized blockchain using QuickNode's industry-leading infrastructure. Now turning to today's topic and why everyone's here, the right way to roll up. We have a few things on today's agenda. First, by the end of today's discussion, you'll have a better understanding of what a rollup is and why you might choose to deploy a rollup versus launching a dApp. Second, you'll hear from leading minds in the space on the current strengths, trends, and challenges in the rollup space. Third, you'll hear how infrastructure providers and foundational layers combine to provide the right rollup launchpad fit for your project. And last, we'll talk about what it takes to create and deploy a rollup today. As I mentioned earlier, we'll have a section for Q&A at the end. Just go ahead and use the Q&A feature inside of Zoom. And as you start to think of questions, pop them into the chat. We'll make sure to save some time at the end to get to all of them. And without further ado, here are today's speakers. I'm Jordan Patapoff, the Senior Director of Ecosystem at QuickNode, where I help lead our startup program and newly formed venture arm. The program that I run helps empower startups at all stages with access to free QuickNode credits, engineering support, partner discounts, mentorship, investor intros, and more. Josh Neuroth is the VP of Product at QuickNode, where he's led the launch of some of our most successful products, some of which we'll cover today. We have Vassilis as the Head of Ecosystem Success at Matter Labs, formerly at Microsoft as the Global Lead for Web3 Business Development and Strategy. He's now responsible for the overall success and growth of the ZKsync ecosystem. Cooper Midroni is the product lead for Orbit Chains at Offchain Labs. With 3 years of experience scaling Ethereum and building layer 2 solutions, he's now working on developing the rapidly growing Orbit Chain ecosystem. And we have Fahim Sachedina, who runs channel partnerships at the Optimism Foundation. With 10 plus years of experience working at fast-growing SaaS companies in the dev tools space, he's currently at Optimism, focusing on bringing more teams into the Superchain ecosystem. Now, let's go ahead and dive in. The right way to roll up. Josh, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Jordan. Well, welcome, everyone. We're excited to be here today, to have this great discussion. I think this is the first time that we've gotten these three awesome teams together on the same call, so we're excited about that. Let's maybe kind of start with our topics for today. So let's talk about like what is a rollup first. We won't spend too much time on this. I'll kind of kick that off and then pass it over to each panelist. So one of the things we're excited about is just how the future of Ethereum is really a rollup centric roadmap. And what we've seen is kind of like Ethereum has tried to maintain its decentralization, but that has also created some scalability challenges. And effectively, the Ethereum team was planning on doing sharding, kind of all these different technologies to help that scalability. But because of the work that Optimism, Arbitrum, and now ZKsync are doing, that it's more or less being communicated that the future of Ethereum is going to be these rollups that expand the scalability of the Ethereum blockchain. So let me start with Fahim at Optimism. What are your thoughts on that? And what is a rollup, and how do you see that in the work that you guys are doing there on the scalability?
For sure. Yeah, GM everyone. Great to be here. It's a great question. As we think about rollups, it's like, why do we even have rollups? And I think you covered this a little bit as you talk about Ethereum and the importance of scaling Ethereum. Like Ethereum is the foundation for everything, right? There's a question in the chat around whose stack is better. And I would say Ethereum, right? We're building on the shoulders of giants, and we allow, like, because of Ethereum, we exist. And I really feel like our responsibility is to scale Ethereum. In order to do that, we need rollups. So Ethereum, super expensive, super just a kind of tedious cost, like the congestion is just crazy. It leads to high costs. It leads to people not getting their transactions finalized on time. So we need to have faster and cheaper ways in order for people to be on chain, in order to transact, in order to adopt Web3 and crypto native tooling. That's where rollups come in, and that's where stacks like all of these kind of wonderful ecosystems have flourished. And a rollup essentially is on-chain compute. Essentially, it's decentralized block space that allows teams to have their own and build their own chain and their own experience without having to be on another chain and have to deal with either congestion or high gas fees or all the common problems that we've mentioned that have occurred with Ethereum so far. So I like to think of rollups as kind of like your own Dockerized containers for those in kind of the dev tooling world of Web 2. And these are kind of our own servers that allow us to scale transactions, activity, and allow us to do so at a much, much more reasonable cost base compared to what it would be like if all of these transactions just happened on Ethereum. So I like to think of it as we're not all just driving on one highway and getting stuck in a whole bunch of traffic. It's like we're building this multitude of highways that allow us to reach these destinations much faster in a much more efficient way without having to worry about congestion or high toll costs.
I love that. I love that highway analogy. I was thinking about what are some good analogies to just describe like what a rollup is to an average person. And one that I've also found useful is kind of describing it almost like we're zipping transactions, like it's a zipped file. And then those transactions can more efficiently go to Ethereum, and that allows us to be able to store more and have more experiences. Cooper, you're running product side with Orbit. How would you respond to that? How do you see rollups and what they serve? I know you guys have a flourishing DeFi community right now on Arbitrum. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think first I want to say that everything Fahim said, absolutely right on the money in terms of how we think about rollups. It's all about scaling Ethereum, and also rollups originally were created to solve the blockchain trilemma, which is to add that aspect of scalability to what Ethereum already has done really well at, which is security and decentralization. And in a way, this whole conversation we can kind of take for granted that we now live in a rollup centric world, but I think 2 or 3 years ago it wasn't obvious. But now that we're here, the way I think about rollups is that it's kind of a established primitive for adding on-chain compute. And so let's say you want to add more lanes to that highway. Well, that actually does require that there's more servers and computers in the world that are obeying the standards of what we consider to be a blockchain that works with Ethereum. And rollups just happen to become the primitive that is the best at us doing that. And especially, in the era of rollup as a service teams offering those services, we're really seeing how easy it is for teams to spin this up, similar to what people are familiar with, Vercel or traditional compute platforms. I'd also like to add, in terms of the problems that rollups are solving, it's no longer about the scalability additions. I think that problem is solved, but there are new challenges that rollups help blockchain developers address. I think these challenges include adding differentiated block space. So it's not just a kind of direct replica of what the EVM offers, but it's actually giving you some kind of new special ingredient that you can offer and build a unique app experience upon. And the other one is really this rollups being a better unit economic model for applications. If you're a successful app, you can kind of monetize the transaction flow that you're getting through your stack as a rollup, sometimes a lot better than deploying on an existing chain. So these are two new problems that I think are emerging, being solved, and people are really using these stacks in a great way to kind of take Ethereum and Ethereum development further.
I love that. It's a great segue. You said differentiated block space, and I know Matter Labs has been working on the zero knowledge proof based block space. Vassilis, can you talk a little bit about how you guys see that? And I think Arbitrum, Optimism have kind of pioneered roles, but you guys are kind of coming in with this native support for zero knowledge proofs. Can you talk a little bit about how that affects the rollup space?
Sure. And hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. First of all, everything that Fahim and Cooper said absolutely aligned with our vision, right? Maybe I would emphasize the point that Cooper made, which is, yes, at the beginning, the rollups were all about, solving scalability, but now it's all about business modeling, but also customizability, right? Maybe you used the word analogy before, Josh. So maybe a good analogy is like a website, right? You can build your website exactly as you want, as you wish. If you're a merchant, if you want to have like an online store, but you can also go to Amazon.com, but it's a very predefined, let's say, template of what you can do there as a merchant. So that's a good analogy that I'm using. Now, regarding Matter Labs, which is the company contributing to the ZKsync ecosystem, yes, we are the first dominant ZK VM rollup, and we do believe that ZK is the end game. We do believe that ZK solves pretty much all the challenges that were mentioned in the previous arguments. And our vision, it's encapsulated under what we call the elastic chain. Elastic chain is a federation of autonomous ZK chains that are interconnected with each other, right? And we're very happy, to be honest with you, that the whole industry, I think, now believes that ZK is the end game, right? For example, and I'm saying this in a very positive way, I'm not trying to do any kind of spicy takes here. We saw recently the news about Optimism working closely with companies that are doing ZK technology like ZKsync. So it's great. It's great. I think ZK is definitely the solution to many problems, and we're very happy to be pioneering that side of things.
Love that. I think there was something maybe that Cooper said, and I know that all of you guys have more or less are working on or already support custom gas tokens for rollups. And so, I think for maybe our attendees today and who will be listening to this recording later, I think that's very, very significant. And we see that at QuickNode because, what effectively this space is, what I think this is kind of our lens for what's happening in the rollup space. But if you think about like raising money as a Web3 startup, maybe you're launching like some kind of D app and you're building on Ethereum, it's been effectively kind of hard to raise money since maybe 2021. I think there's several reasons for that. You could contribute that to the fact that your smart contracts are all public and open source. But with the custom gas tokens, it effectively gives applications and communities a way to raise money because they can raise money on their token. It's almost like a new path to fundraising that maybe is a bit different than like what we've seen over the last 2 decades in kind of the Web2 space with the traditional, equity and cap table side. Can you guys each talk a little bit about what you're seeing in your ecosystems with custom gas tokens and kind of the investor sentiment around that? Maybe we'll start again with Fahim.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really interesting one. I think with the custom gas token, so for those who don't know, essentially with a custom gas token, you can use a ERC20 token to be deposited in as the native token to pay for gas fees. So instead of it being ETH, it can be a stable coin, it can be a native token that you've just created. So it does provide utility to that project's token as you're using it to transact and for gas related purposes. You can also make it much easier to subsidize gas costs for users directly. And it can really help specifically if I think about a specific area of like gaming, for example. I think it can really help to facilitate in-game economies and allow players to pay for gas with their in-game currency. So that's a really exciting use case that I think we're seeing more people look towards doing. And overall, it just builds alignment with a community via a token. I think when it comes to investor sentiment, it's definitely worthwhile and definitely a good play for teams to generate and to look at how they can build utility for their token. I would probably say actually maybe like a counter or contrarian take to it is, we shouldn't necessarily be looking for specific ways in order to generate investor sentiment and then find ways to generate utility for that token. I think it's one whereby by building and finding ways to host as well as develop even in-house just valuable dApps on your ecosystem and building community around value that people are receiving, as opposed to just the transaction of the token. I think that alone will probably lead to a lot more activity. It can lead to just a lot better of kind of community alignment, better vibes overall. And I think that is probably a much better indicator for increased investor sentiment than just having a token as a custom, as your custom gas token on your chain. So I think that's one whereby sometimes some people may think, oh, if I just install this custom gas token, then everyone's going to use our token and activity is going to go through the roof. When actually it comes back to the value that's being generated for the end user and what they're receiving out of that, that kind of trumps everything and should really be that foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that take and kind of the counterpoint there. Cooper, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that Fahim touched on some great points that of where custom gas tokens can bring real utility. For example, having a custom gas token be your network, presumably that token is going to be less expensive than Ethereum, and then through that you have a lower cost basis for transactions, and so that's kind of a highly useful way that you can use a custom gas token that also gives you that launch pad into integrating the token into other useful aspects of your ecosystem. I would also add, because this conversation is kind of premised on the general value of rollups, and we're kind of assuming that custom gas tokens are a major part of that value, I'd love to call it another one, which is that if you're going to be an application, your general kind of market opportunity is seen as just dominating that application space. But if you're going to become an app chain, which is now your application on a dedicated rollup, you also have this call option to kind of grow the ecosystem larger than just the app that your team is building. And I think that in particular, that's a very attractive positioning for investors, because it leads to the opportunity to take a very explosively growing app and actually find synergies with other teams who want to contribute to your ecosystem, also driving value possibly to that token through the same methods of just either integrating it into an experience or just kind of having more users transacting in it. So I think rollups, for a lot of reasons, not just tokens, are kind of providing a lot greater value to developers, but definitely tokens can kind of be a reliable way to lower those costs for users and also align ecosystem participants across the app, the chain, or other applications.
That actually brings up a great point. We've been one of the leading providers that rollups are coming to launch kind of their RPC infra with. And I think the Xi team that's in one of your orbit chains, their VP of product said to me, like, they think about like, why do a rollup? They think about it as serverless compute. And effectively, like, they can build that ecosystem around their gaming studio just by using this kind of on-chain mechanism. And so that's kind of an interesting philosophy that we're starting to see play out, that the teams are seeing rollups not just for like an ERC20 token, not just for a path for fundraising, but building their own ecosystem and having kind of this like serverless technology, use the blockchain for compute, have everything kind of open and transparent for their community. So love to see that. Vassilis, how are you guys thinking about kind of like the custom gas tokens? You've seen some projects kind of popping up, moving over to ZKsync lately. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Again, all of the points made before were really spot on. So I don't want to extend them. I agree with everything that the guys said. I would say that we also see something else, which is, yes, custom gas token is extremely important, but we also see the phenomenon of completely gasless transactions and account and paymaster really, really skyrocketing. Again, we are very happy because we were the ones pioneered paymaster and account abstraction. And actually, we see that most of the chains launching on ZK Stack, they take by default gasless. The user onboarding is much simpler, it's much easier. People don't even need to know what gas is. One of my hot takes is that actually, if we want to onboard the next billion users, as we keep saying, all of us, right? People should not even know what gas is. The same way that I do not know how much $0.00001 goes to AWS or GCP or Azure when I swipe my credit card. because there is a cost, right? Something goes to the cloud. So there is a, a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a dollar going to a centralized cloud provider. So, but the same way that I don't care, like Visa or MasterCard has completely abstracted this from me. They do not tell me, hey, Vasily, your groceries cost $20, but it will cost $20.05 because we need to pay AWS. It's completely abstracted from me, right? The same way it should be for Rollups. So that's what we see, and we are very happy and proud of this, number one. But number two, I would like mostly to extend what Cooper said, because I completely agree with him, which is we see most of the projects that we're having on our Elastic chain using tokens for, let's call it community alignment, value alignment, and collaboration, right? A good example for me is Bonsai. Bonsai is, I wouldn't call it a meme coin, I would call it a social token in the Lens ecosystem, right? Which is building on ZK stack. And you can use it for pretty much everything. You can tip creators. You can use it to mint cool art on Lens. You can use it to exchange, to be the native token of a group or a DAO on the Lens ecosystem. So for me, that's like a very new primitive. Nobody on the internet has done it in the past, right? We are the first, we meaning the on-chain industry, not we as ZKsync, but like we now have these coordination mechanisms that are tokens that can align people towards incentives. Yes, some of them are like meme coins and maybe they are, financially opportunistic, sure, right? And who am I to judge this? I'm just saying that it's very myopic to go and say, oh, meme coins is just for financial revenue. No, meme coins could be for community alignment. And we want to explore, we want to innovate with those players behind them.
Love that. Love the take. Certainly, I was looking at, the Coinbase's, their reports back in March of this year. Base Protocol contributed 16 million in revenue in a single month, right, to Coinbase's top line revenue. I think there's a lot of enterprises looking at that and thinking about like, how could we do a roll up and potentially build an ecosystem that could become, a revenue generating tool. And certainly, Base is probably the outlier, but nonetheless, Coinbase is pioneering that as like a new revenue stream. So let's talk a little bit about kind of some of the challenges that enterprises in particular. We've seen dozens, if not hundreds of teams doing rollups now, primarily in kind of the Web3 native space. But how do we start going outside of the Web3 ecosystem and getting traditional enterprises to do a rollup? I did want to add that I think from QuickNode's point of view, we're excited about this because I think it expands the total addressable market of this space, right? And we've seen kind of like financial companies, they've been experimenting with R3 Corda, they've been experimenting with Hyperledger, but these kind of distributed ledger attacks, they don't really have that community excitement that the Ethereum community has. So I'll go back to Fahim on this. You guys have Base Protocol as one of your super chains. What are some things that we need to do as an ecosystem, as a collective group to help enterprises, come into the space and do a roll-up chain?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that, even when Base were, probably making their decision around launching their own chain, one of the things that I'm sure had probably come up in the room was around like, should we go permissioned? Should we go permissionless? And I would say that it is infinitely shown that it has been a better choice for them to choose the permissionless route and benefit for the scalability of Ethereum than it would have been had they gone with a private or permission route. Now, I'm not saying that they were considering that at the time, I'm not sure, but I think definitely by having and showing that Ethereum-based alignment has proven to be infinitely better for them in terms of the rewards, and the ceiling that they have is just gone up. In terms of activity on Base, it's continually increasing. I remember back in March when it was like 15, 20, they went to 20, then 30 million transactions per day. And it's phenomenal to kind of see that continually increasing. And now we're at like, something like 5 million transactions per day, I believe, around that. So it's incredible to see that level of growth. And I think that's something that we want to encourage other members of the Superchain ecosystem to look at and to really leverage. When it comes to enterprises looking at that and thinking, how can we do something similar? I think it's really our responsibility to focus on three things. One is on infrastructure and tooling. How can we make tooling better? How can we infinitely make it easier for teams to find the right open source tooling, the right SDKs, to leverage other partners, tech implementation partners, in order to have these visions come to life? The second is looking at regulation. And I think about regulation, I think very much about like professionalism and really raising the standards of Web3 and the conversations we're having and ensuring that there is, we are taking note of being compliant wherever we're operating. And the third is really around distribution. So when it comes to teams launching a rollup, I would say over the past 24 months, it's become so much easier to launch your own rollup. And you can do so even with the QuickNode RAS platform now in like less than a day, right? Probably even faster than that.
15 minutes.
15 minutes. There you go. So it's got infinitely easier to do that, but it's still a challenge when it comes to, okay, I've launched a chain, now what? So there is an ecosystem that needs to be built. There's distribution that needs to be built. There is dApps that need to be onboarded. So with all of these kind of aspects, they need to be considered right from the very beginning to be ecosystem first, as opposed to just thinking about the tech all the time. So those are probably the focus areas that I think are really going to help to think about how we onboard great enterprises into this space.
Yeah, and you guys just announced your new tool called SuperSim. Can you give us a little preview on what that is and why it matters for enterprises?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the use cases that we see overall in Web3 is around network effects that come from composability. And what I mean by composability is if you're building on one chain, you want to be able to easily either port that over or interact with another app on another chain. And that's where interoperability comes to the fore. And that's really what us with the Superchain here at Optimism are really trying to push forward and advocate. And one of the aspects of that we've recently built to kind of move towards that direction is with SuperSim. So SuperSim essentially allows you to locally observe cross-chain interactions and iterate on multi-chain apps. So it allows you to build apps in a much easier way and be able to observe cross-chain messages. And there's a lot that we're building specifically around interoperability to enable this world where we're all living in a way where apps are composable and it doesn't matter what chain you're on, because the app is able to interface and talk to another app on another chain, and it all just feels like one easy, seamless experience. So SuperSim is one step towards that by enabling or observing cross-chain interactions. And that can work locally with Optimism protocol features, and it can interact really easily with third-party integrations as well. So there's a lot that we're doing to kind of enable this world of interop to come to the fore and for teams to really benefit from scaled network effects, essentially shared liquidity, shared users, and shared developers in one place in an Ethereum aligned ecosystem.
Yeah,
so that's what
really love that focus on interoperability. Cooper, you guys are tackling the problem of how do we get enterprises to kind of come into this space without having to retrain development teams for Web3. Can you tell us a little bit about Stylus and what else you guys are working on to kind of help enable that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Stylus is essentially another VM that sits alongside the EVM in an Orbit chain. And Stylus can compile any WASM-based language, which includes Rust, C, C++, into WASM. And from there, it kind of works natively within the stack, just like Solidity. And so what this means is that there's actually the entire ecosystem of developers and tooling that is applied for these programming languages can now also be used in the blockchain context. And so the reason this is massive is because overnight, all of a sudden 3 million more developers could build in these environments and contribute. For enterprises, this means they don't have to retrain some of their staff. It means some of their favorite battle-tested libraries are now applicable in these environments that they want to build. So Stylus is something we're really excited about, and we're seeing people take it in multiple directions. both creating more efficient primitives that we already know of in Ethereum through Stylus, but also people who are using Stylus and some of the efficiencies of these languages just generally take the use cases of what you can do on chain further. So not only is it just kind of creating more efficiencies for what we know, but it's also kind of exposing us to new applications that we didn't know we could build and are now able to exist in these on-chain environments.
Love that. Absolutely love that. I can't wait to try that out myself. Vassilis, you guys have you talked a little bit about gasless, and can you tell us a little bit? I know you guys are working on Validiums, and how is ZKsync in particular helping kind of with the UX that enterprises expect and need to adopt Web3 tech?
Sure, and I would say that it's more than UX. So to your question about how enterprises will be convinced, let's say, to build on the blockchain, it's something we've been discussing for years. I'm coming from a very enterprise background. I was working for Microsoft, and I remember back in the days when many banks that were Microsoft customers back then, they were asking us about R3 Corda, or Hyperledger. And again, all respect to those teams, have nothing against them. But since then, since let's say 2019 or 2020, we, meaning the industry, has made amazing progress, right? So I would say that right now, there is no reason that an enterprise would not trust Ethereum L2s, and I would say even more specifically ZK native L2s to build upon, right? So stuff like security, scalability, confidentiality, interoperability, UX, like these are things that many enterprise consider as a given, as de facto, right? In Web 2, right? You can do pretty much anything you want when you're building on a cloud provider. That's exactly the experience we want to mimic, for the lack of a better term, in our ZK stack on the Elastic chain. And we do that. Validiums, since you mentioned Validiums, we see Validiums being probably the best PMF that we have with big enterprises, and I would say mostly TradFi, right? Because with Validiums, enterprises still feel confident, still feel they can sleep well at night, knowing that they can, store their chain, store their data off chain. So Validium seems to have a great PMF. But as I said, things like Paymaster, account abstraction, these are great things that definitely facilitate a better onboarding for enterprises. There are two more things I would like to say, which we see a lot,
please.
Is that when it comes to enterprises, yes, the developer experience plays a role. Yes, scalability, technology, UX play a tremendous role. But we do see one more thing that makes a difference, which is how the organizations behind the L2s, in that case, Matter Labs, Offchain Labs, OP Labs, also offer what we call ecosystem success or partner success, right? It is one thing to tell them, yeah, sure, you can go and build on OP or ZK or Arbitrum, but it's a different thing to have a team, a dedicated team, both of engineers and business professionals that will hold their hand throughout the way. It's a very new paradigm for them, right? And you cannot just throw them in the deep waters, right?
Right.
The CFO, the chief legal officer, of course, the developer, they all need to be aligned because it's a very new environment for them. So if we want to be on board the enterprises, yes, we need to have better technology. And I think each one of those three teams that are represented today are doing great innovations in technology, but we also need to innovate more on the soft side of things, which is business support, go-to-market success, investing, legal, finance, all these other things which are very important for an enterprise.
Absolutely. One of the things that we found at QuickNode, as we started our Rollup as a service platform, is that just kind of like doing things out of the box, we would have to break kind of our SOC 2 compliance. And so we've had to actually add quite a bit to the Rollup frameworks and kind of how they're deployed to meet SOC 2 compliance. One of those things was, the integration with cloud security management. So and that's been a huge, feature that our enterprises have been excited about and to be honest, just needed to do that. So definitely we're early days, more to do on the enterprise front. I'm glad you guys all have your kind of unique approaches towards doing that. So let's talk about a little bit, we're almost at time here. I do want to leave time for Q&A at the end. can you guys talk a bit about, what tools and resources you guys have today at each one of your ecosystems? Vassilis, you mentioned kind of like more of a maybe even pro serve or just a team that can get behind, enterprise and bring them on. But what you guys all have ecosystem and grant programs. If anything you want to highlight today?
I can start since I'm usually the last one speaking up, and then I will leave the floor to Fahim and Cooper. So our governance. So again, Matter Labs, the company behind ZKsync, as probably many people know, we had our token released a few months ago. Now we have our governance going live. So stay tuned. Many grants and programs coming for governance on the ZK side of things. But still, of course, the team, the Matter Labs team, we're here to lean in and work with our partners and really onboard them into the ZK universe, right? So these are things that I would say, which is a very hands-on approach. So if you want to reach out, you know where to find us. We're very active on all social media. But as I said, a lot of governance, let's say, proposals are coming to the ZK, and grants will be announced. So again, I don't want to jump the gun, but stay tuned.
Okay. Cooper, Fahim.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this. So I think, when you're building in the Orbit ecosystem, you get a lot of, the best of all worlds, just like Vassilis was saying, with the, kind of soft support as well as the, harder technical support. Frequently one of the things that I'm doing in the space is talking to, prospective Orbit chains or current Orbit chains, talking them through, how they're designing their ecosystem, helping them identify gaps that are, unique to the Rollup experience that relate to infrastructure, and kind of how they can, make certain trade-offs in their favor, as well as, working with us, you get access to the Offchain Labs partnerships team, which is essentially a connection to, any one who's built in the Arbitrum ecosystem, which is quite a large swath of the space. And then on the technical side, I think most important of that is that we have our relationships with the Rollup as a service teams, just like QuickNode, who are basically becoming the front line of supporting Orbit chains and helping those teams deploy the actual infra. And the relationship we have with those teams is very support heavy, very close partnerships where we are having our engineers collaborate on making better experiences for end users. And I think that really helps drive the Orbit chain experience to its absolute best. So the tooling we provide to chains and to the Rollup as a service teams really does make a difference in terms of the quality of experience these chains have. So I think above all, it's a very collaborative ecosystem, and we're here to help you succeed.
Love that.
Yeah, I'd really echo both Vassilis and Cooper's points around ecosystem supports and that kind of maybe that softer side that's required. This is difficult technology that we're working with. The benefits are there to be realized, but at the same time, it's important to have a team right beside you to kind of have you have yourself kind of walk through the key components required in order to build a thriving ecosystem. I would say one kind of bastion of optimism, values, and pushing this movement and industry forward has been Optimism governance, and everything that we're in, like I think season 6 now of Optimism governance, and we've got a really active grants council as well as retro funding as well. So retroactive funding, we've had around 850 million OP dedicated towards projects that have created impact within the Optimism ecosystem, essentially within the Superchain, as we say that Optimism equals a Superchain. And retro funding has really been there to reward teams, builders, developers, OP stack contributors, governance contributors for the impact that they're creating in order to push this forward and to create this kind of positive sum effects. Similar with the Grants Council in the work that they're doing to kind of fund open source and public goods, which has kind of been one of the core values of Optimism. And then I would just say, again, like as Cooper was saying, just our ecosystem partners, like without them, we wouldn't be able to move as fast as we have been, probably similar with the other ecosystems. So whether it be teams like QuickNode and many other partners that are able to really support us and support the teams that we work with very, very closely as well.
Love it, love it. And I have to talk a little bit about our platform too. Our QuickNode, we have more than 460,000 registered accounts on our platform now. we're seeing rollup teams come to us to basically get distribution, because, get developers into your ecosystem. And so I love to think about like kind of the rollup as a service offering. Yes, we'll help you deploy your rollup, but we'll also scale up your RPC, we'll scale up your developer tools, help you reach developers, and ultimately work with all of you, as some of our customers are still kind of in the exploratory phase of like figuring out, what stack should I use? What DA layer should I use? Where should I put data? So it's definitely going to take all of us to, improve this, but I think we're all on the same page. We're all on the same team helping, we want to see Web3 really take over the world and reach the next billion users, as we always say. So, Jordan, I'm going to pass it back to you to kind of facilitate Q&A.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate that, Josh. That was really great. Vassilis, Cooper, Fahim, Josh, appreciate your time today. So right now is your last time to get questions into the Q&A. Currently, we have 5, so let's go ahead and get those kicked off. This one is from Carl. He asked, what are your views on the importance of decentralization with regard to sequencers? I think I'll go reverse order. Vassilis, how about you get us started?
It's a great question, and it's potentially an elephant in the room, to be honest and transparent with you. We have publicly committed that we will be moving next year in efforts to decentralize sequencer. So that's, let's say, something coming from other labs, but also as a generic industry comment, this is also goes back to what Josh said before about many teams, projects, or enterprises jumping into the Offchain thesis because they believe they will make a lot of money from the sequencer revenue. Yes, that's true, but it's a bit short-sighted, to be honest. And it's not the right reason to launch an Offchain because you will make money from the sequencer, right? It's something which probably is going to zero, or it's going to be decentralized. So we need to find more sustainable business models in crypto if we want to have a better future. So that's my short and potentially spicy take, but definitely.
No, it's true. It's true, though.
Yeah,
it's true, though. If you have 10 sequencers, you have to divide your revenue by 10.
Exactly. And if the fees go down, continue going down, which they will, because that's the fate of technology. It will continue improving, right? Sequencer revenue is not a sustainable business model, at least for large enterprises. So yeah, decentralizing sequencer, part of our roadmap for the next years, definitely a very important topic, and we should all discuss it rather than put it under the carpet.
Great insight. Appreciate that. Cooper, would love your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about things like decentralization, the answer, from our perspective as like tech stack providers, is how do you let users express their preference along the spectrum of decentralization, which could include somebody wanting to be centralized and just running their own sequencer, let's say as a traditional business. And it can include kind of a collection of chains that all subscribe to a network of sequencers. So really, our goal is to kind of allow that enablement on the platform level. And to our extent, in Orbit and Offchain Labs, we have a partnership with Espresso Systems, who is a leading team in designing decentralized sequencing technology. And I think that our work there will kind of help bring the option for them to express that preference to all the Orbit stack natively. I think one thing that's important as well is that these features are available on the kind of canonical stack, and so the partnership we have will definitely deliver that and make sure that our teams can express their preferred amount of decentralization and their preferred trust models that they want to opt their ecosystems into.
Really great. Fahim, would love your take.
For sure, yeah. I think we have a super kind of high level of focus going into 2025 on assisting and helping as many of these standard config chains that are part of the OP stack that sign up to be essentially Superchain aligned chains to stage 1 of decentralization. So essentially that is a limited set of training wheels whereby not everything is controlled by one single party. In addition to that, that also involves rolling out fault proofs to many of these standard configuration-based chains as well. So that is a core focus for us in order to really promote the ideals of decentralization. It is core to everything that we've done, from governance to tech to open access, and even like ourselves and how we think about decentralizing Optimism Foundation and the work that we're doing as well. So that is really core to the work that we're doing, and excited for all of us to really push that forward in this space and to show the importance of that, so that we're not kind of signing up to the same level of extractive value that happened in Web 2, and really redefining what a new economy looks like in Web 3, and pushing kind of a new frontier of the internet.
Great insight. Cool. For this next one, Cooper, I'll go ahead and start with you. This question is from Jose. What would you consider to be the biggest threats to the success of rollups?
That's a really good question. I think something that we definitely need to ask quite often, so that we're aware of like what the risk can be and how we can kind of build against that. I think I'll start by saying that right now I'm really confident that all the infrastructure pieces and the technical primitives are present for what we need in Ethereum to scale decentralized applications to where they need to go. And to that extent, my view on one of the greatest risks is kind of the incentives distortion that can occur in the space. Obviously, there's a very financially driven aspect to what we're doing, and there's technology, but there's also that kind of mercenary opportunity of attracting funds by issuing unsustainable yield, kind of doing instead of building a 0-1 product, building kind of like a 1 to 1,000 of the same kind of forks. And so I would love to see the success of this space take off with like novel innovations that are each taking, building new applications that could have been built before. But one of the risks is kind of just this behavioral risk that we just continue to kind of repeat what has been done before. And to me, that has a lot to do with just kind of how, it's a heavily incentivized space where that behavior can easily be rewarded, as opposed to building kind of the hard thing of like a completely new and viable company.
Fahim, would love to hear your take on this as well.
Yeah, I really resonate with that too. I think that we need to really push the bounds of what new economic models look like. I think if we continue to build upon what's been done before, we'll just replicate a much more inferior system that's already been developed in Web 2, both from a speed, performance, cost basis. And so I think that it involves really leveraging and really pushing the boundaries of what experimentation looks like in Web 3, finding these novel use cases, running with them, being able to experiment and iterate quickly, and also just building a chain that's ecosystem ready, and not just kind of building a chain, having a custom gas token, having an alt-DA provider, and expecting success. Like, I think we really need to focus on how we go about building great ecosystems, thriving ecosystems where people can benefit and really benefit from these novel use cases that can come up. That's going to take people sometimes pushing the boundaries, sometimes failing, but also hopefully the cost base and the space itself can encourage that innovation and encourage failure to an extent, so that we can then continue to build on top of what's been built before, and not just not encourage that type of behavior. So I think it's really important that we focus on those sorts of aspects in order to really grow this space and really leverage what we already have and build on top of giants, essentially.
Great insight. And Vassilis, what would you consider to be the biggest threats to the success of rollups?
For the sake of brevity, launching a rollup for not the right reasons, that is a recipe for not succeeding. So if you make a rollup just to make some sequencer revenue, yeah, you may be successful for 6-12 months, but you're not gonna make it. So if you launch a rollup for the wrong reasons, you won't be successful. But if you have a plan, if you have an economic model, if you have a business idea, if you have a community, if you have a strategy, you will thrive.
Love that answer. And Josh, would also love kind of your perspective from more of the infrastructure side of things. What do you see as the biggest threat to success?
Yeah, so I think I kind of mentioned some of the stuff around like the private admin keys for the rollup. I think with a single sequencer, we've just talked about how there is a roadmap for decentralization. There are some security concerns. I do think some of the remedy for those security concerns are, one of the things I briefly mentioned this before, that we do see a QuickNode, is that some of these enterprises kind of want to do a rollup, but they more or less want to do it in private mode, not announce it to the community, start integrating partners through RPC and whatnot, and building on their chain. And they're almost wanting to future-proof it to the sense that maybe when there's a little bit more regulatory clarity, they'll feature flag it, go public with it. So I think there are solutions for that, but I do think there are still some single point of failures in the rollup space that we need to work through as a community. And it'd be a shame if like one of the larger rollups out there did get hacked or something like that. So, but I think there are great security kind of mechanisms in place still, and they'll increase, and we'll keep getting better at that.
Really appreciate that response. All right, so moving on to our next question, I'm actually going to combine a few of them because I think thematically they're very similar. So this is from Sahil. What does the future of interop between ecosystem look like? Between Hyperchain, Orbit, Superchain. Doug kind of piled onto that. He said, he's also curious, how do things like Chainlink CCIP fit into this? And then the question from Carl is, I think everyone is working on their own version of a combined liquidity pool. For example, OP's Superchain. Is there a reason why this couldn't be done across the entire L2 ecosystem, regardless of chain stack? So, I'll kind of combine those together. Fahim, maybe I'll go ahead and get started with you for this question.
Yeah, for sure. These are like excellent questions for sure. And I think when it comes to interop, there is, if we I think the previous or like to Carl's question as well around, why couldn't this be done across the entire L2 ecosystem? I feel like if we don't work together and we don't collaborate, we're basically just building the same system again, and we're going to lead to a lot more multi-chain fragmentation across these ecosystems. So it is imperative that as we think about interop, this isn't just interop between the chains that are in our own respective ecosystems, but it's interop across Web3. And in order to do that, we need to have standardization and we need to have standardized interfaces. And in order to do that, that involves us working together. It involves collaboration across all of our ecosystems and even the ecosystems outside of that, to invest in standardized interfaces. And that's most likely going to be at the canonical Ethereum kind of protocol level, at the L1 level, and looking at EIPs that kind of promote or advocate for interop across these different networks to kind of unlock a huge network effect and a much better seamless UX across these ecosystems. So that involves, instances like advocating for ERC 7683, for instance, which leverages other bridges that can work together in a much more seamless manner. And then also looking and investing into native interoperability across our own ecosystems as well. So that involves like having a really clear and stable and highly secure message passing protocol. It involves kind of an interop fault proof and a lot more other kind of technical milestones in order to do that. But the work is really important because native interop really unlocks the biggest network effects and will have and generate a much more seamless UX and really abstract away a lot of the technicals that we see right now, which act as barriers and act as friction points for people entering the ecosystem.
Fahim, really appreciate that. Vassilis, would love your take as well.
Sure. And again, I'm mindful of the time. So we do have our own, let's say, vision about our universe of ZK chains. We call it the elastic chain, and there will be native interop, and there will be seamless cross-chain bridging. So that's number one about the elastic chain. Now about connecting all the L2s, again, I will echo what Fahim said. To be honest, I believe that it will never, but it will be very difficult. I don't want to say never, but it will be very difficult and challenging to reach to a native interoperability between the Superchain and the Arbitrum and the ZK chains. I think it's very challenging from a technology point of view, but we do see efforts like the CCIP from Chainlink. Like I think a few minutes ago, Axelar announced a new initiative. We have Layer 0. We have great players, very smart teams thinking about cross-chain interoperability. But that being native without any trade-offs, it is very challenging if we want to be honest with ourselves.
Love that. Cooper, would love your thoughts on this as well.
Interoperability is definitely, one of the top talking points, when I'm speaking to customers. I think that's something that's really missing from the conversation, both with customers and kind of more broadly, let's say on Twitter, is, not all interoperability is made equal. And you don't actually care about accessing some chains the same that you access all chains. So I kind of think about it as a 2x2 matrix. On one axis, you have trust. On the other one, you have connectivity. And so the axes that matter the most is the trusted and highly connected axis, where you have very aligned partners that want near instant access to each other. And then the other axis that matters a lot is the unaligned and kind of far axis or quadrant, where you have chains that don't even know that they exist, but they still need some reason to communicate because it's some marginal reason that users need to move assets or move messages. And so I think that the role of rollup stack providers is really to provide the kind of close and aligned quadrant. And the reason for that is that when you're aligned, you're trusting people to get really great benefits like synchronous messaging and kind of like instant state transfers, but that requires trust. And so that often will mean that there's some kind of permissioning factor or a gatekeeper. That gatekeeper might be an on-chain proof. It might be, some curator that's kind of gathering all those chains together. In Orbit, our version of this, we call cluster chains. And then when it comes to the, unaligned and kind of far interoperability, I think that's where third parties come in. And they're going to be facilitating messages between chains that don't even know that each other exists. And between that, you might cover kind of all of the major use cases that you typically want when people ask for interop between chains.
Love that. So we're almost out of time, but we have so many great questions. I think we'll just keep going as long as anyone, as long as you all can stay on. If you need to jump, then that's certainly okay too. This next one is from Jose. Where do you see the next major influx of rollups coming from, and why? Which kind of projects, companies, industries, etc.? Cooper, maybe I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, I think my answer would just be, every corner of the ecosystem. I think, again, rollups are just this incredible new primitive that let people express, an application or a user experience in some new way. And so to that extent, there's, gaming chains, DeFi chains, there's, DePIN, people putting, the connectivity for physical infrastructure on chain. I think the more interesting part is that each of those rollups and those kind of, categories are going to need different things from the stack. And so, the influx is really going to be how can the rollup stacks enable all of these like diverse explosion of use cases from kind of a central place. To me, I think customization plays a big role in there, which is that these new users can actually drive like unique use cases on their chains by taking what is like the vanilla canonical stack and making it very specialized for their use case. So I think the major like success of these chains will come from customizations and specializations, but the actual chains themselves are coming from every corner of the ecosystem.
Love that. Vassilis.
Sure. And I apologize in advance, but after that I will have to jump. But everyone, I'm always, to all the people who are listening to us, I'm always reachable, and feel free to reach out to me if you have questions specifically about ZK. But to the specific question, I would say, I agree with what Cooper said. Maybe I would add two more, let's say, angles. One angle is that I see projects which are inherently social. They either have a community or their business is based upon the idea of people connecting with each other, having a de facto, let's say, tendency to launch a rollup, right? So that's number one. So that's why gaming or social media, we see them adopting, let's say, rollup technology easier than others. And the other one is something that I don't know if it was Fahim or Cooper that said before that it really resonates with me, which is this idea. I call it hyperstructure, but everyone using a different word, which is businesses that allow other people to build on top of them, right? I think these also have a tendency and a natural affinity to have a rollup. So for example, if you are a decentralized social network like Lens, and you invite developers to build the next YouTube, the next Facebook, the next Instagram on top of your network, it makes more sense for you to launch a rollup ASAP rather than having an app. So inherently social and inherently hyperstructural, although it's not the word. These are the two things I would say that probably we will see more rollups coming from that part of the industry.
Makes sense. Really appreciate that answer. And Vassilis, I know you have to jump. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining today. Yeah, for anyone else that has to jump, let us know. But Fahim, would love your take on this as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to jump after this as well. But I would really advocate for many of the points already mentioned on this. I would say the first thing that I've seen is around these kind of in-game economies as people look at having a customizable experience across their chain, and whereby that's important. And then something that Vassilis had just mentioned, I like to think of them as like platform-first companies, whereby they'll actually benefit if you're building on top of those protocols. So that could be anything from like Twitter to Etsy, for instance, and seeing many of these teams hopefully come on chain and decide that, oh, there's like reasons for them to do so because it allows them to open up to their users more reasons for people to be building applications because they can benefit from shared network effects, from shared users, from developers on a marketplace. Like these are really great reasons for why I would see kind of the next influx of rollups.
Love that. And Fahim, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining today. This was great. So Cooper, Josh, if you want to stick around, we have one more from Doug. Good one. So where do you stand on the question of using a few widely used rollups versus creating tons of purpose-built, maybe often one-off rollups? Would love your take on this, Cooper.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will also have to be the last question for me, but happy to answer it. I think it also touched on, part of my last answer, which is, there's a place for both. I think that the, challenge of being a general purpose rollup is that you can't make trade-offs or specializations, which in some cases limit you from offering that like super bespoke application experience. So it really depends on the goal of, the chain owner and the chain operator. Maybe their goal is to facilitate hundreds of apps, in which case, they will have to stick to kind of fairly general optimizations that lift, all boats together. But in the case that, you want to make a very specific experience, you can make those trade-offs and those specializations, which, should allow you to fit into a niche and maybe find product market fit a bit better. So I think there's room for both, but I would expect that a lot of the value that's going to be unlocked in the, coming years is going to be from rollups that are taking that more niche approach.
All right, take us home, Josh. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would just agree with that too. I think as these interrupt tools get better and better, these more niche rollups really will thrive. So we definitely see both of those being needed in this use case. But yeah.
Amazing. All right, well, that wraps up today's event. Thank you, everyone who was able to join. And as always, don't hesitate to reach out to us or to anyone that was on the panel today with any questions if there's anything that we could do to help. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you soon.